Yes, and sadly, I heard Usainu call it the Barrow Constitution in your interview.
Barrow Papers.
Yes, he called it a Barrow paper, which is very condescending. Look, he has to understand the 2020 Constitution that was drafted and submitted to the National Assembly was rejected by the National Assembly, not by Barrow and his cabinet. It passed Barrow and his cabinet. It went to the National Assembly. It was rejected there. And they're still politicizing and blaming President Barrow for that constitutional failure, for the failure of that constitution to pass.
Yeah, they're saying he orchestrated the failure.
I mean, how can he orchestrate?
By dividing what was a majority UDP legislature.
Look, he appointed all the ministers in the cabinet at the time. If he wanted, the easiest way to have undermined it was to get it not past the cabinet. He is the chairman of cabinet. If he wanted to undermine the constitution, he would have undermined it in cabinet. Why allow it to pass from cabinet, go to National Assembly, and the UDP MPs voted against it, and they still cannot muster to accept that they made that constitution to fail. That constitution failed because of Usainu Darboe. And this constitution that we have...
It failed because of Usainu Darboe?
Yes.
How?
Because of who voted against it. Barrow had no MP at that time. There was no Barrow MP in the National Assembly. They were UDP voted members of parliament. Were they NPP MPs at that time? No. There was no NPP parliamentarian. They were UDP elected members of parliament. So whether they were not supporting the UDP agenda, that is a whole different discussion at
Some
another
had already
time.
defected.
Well, defected to who? To where?
Well, they were branded independents at the time because NPP had not come up yet.
Well, Mr. Gomez, they were UDP elected members of parliament.
True, absolutely, I agree.
They voted and collapsed that constitution. So let Usainu Darboe and his UDP take responsibility of the failure of that constitution first. And now coming to this 2024 draft, even before it is tabled, he has announced that his parliamentarians are going to vote against it. So he is not even willing for a compromise. Look, constitution is about paper and writing. What is written there is written by the people. Why don't we allow the process to start and we improve it as we go? We mature it. Usainu Darboe was the vice president when this government started. He was foreign minister. He had control over the National Assembly. Majority of the parliamentarians, even before we talk about this defection.
He said he did everything he could to avoid being seen as undermining the president, trying to play president.
Oh, but he succeeded in getting them to change age limit so that he can be vice president. Because that was the first thing he wanted his parliamentarians to do.
The change was not for him.
It was for him. I heard his interview.
No, it was for Fatoumata Tambajang.
No, look.
Initially.
Look, Fatoumata Tambajang is not over age. The bottom line is, he couldn't have been vice president. So...
Neither could Fatoumata.
They put Fatoumata as vice president. But for him to be vice president, he was over age. They had to change that.
He admitted it in the interview.
So at that time, he could have been able to change most of these laws that he's criticizing today. He had the opportunity. He's the party leader of UDP, he had majority in parliament.
So you don't believe him, apparently, when he said that he tried to avoid being seen to be undermining the powers of the president by trying to do certain things.
Look, he can say that to people who are not in this country or who are not following politics. We all know how he undermined the authority of His Excellency President Adam Barrow.
How did he do it?
I mean, that is a discussion for another day. But one thing for sure, he has always wanted to be president, and he shall remain wanting to be president forever. So that has never changed, even when he was a vice president or a minister. And of course, it was obvious to every Gambian, how even after the presidential election, President Barrow was elected on a coalition ticket as an independent candidate. When they went into parliamentary election, the arrangement was these parliamentarians should have been on independent ticket, just like the president, so that everything would have been transition. But he was the one who insisted that these people are going to be party-based, knowing that the president was not party-based. The president was independent. But he wanted to get parliamentarians under the ticket of UDP that he can control the National Assembly and control authority. So for him to say he never acted in any way to undermine the authorities of the president, he can say that to people who are not politically inclined or who have not been paying attention. We have been paying attention. And we know he has tried to undermine the authority of the president, and he is up to today trying to undermine the authority of the president by sitting a former vice president saying that we will make this country ungovernable. That is treasonous in many places.
On this issue of constitution and compromise, just as you were saying, he should compromise by allowing this to go. He said, well, compromise should have begun with the government going back to the 2020 draft. That would have been, the basis of a compromise, rather than come up with the 2022.
Don't you think that will be a serious disrespect to the institution of National Assembly? Look, I cannot present this document to you. You reject it as an institution. And then I bring it back to you. What am I trying to tell you? Am I shoving it in your throat? You see, if he thinks that way, President Barrow is somebody who believes in democracy and separation of powers and empowering of the institutions. The National Assembly rejected the constitution that was drafted in 2020. In an attempt to compromise, there were so many reasons why they rejected it. And there have been so much stakeholder consultation. Part of that consultation is to gather what are the most controversial points. We try to address those in the 2024 draft constitution. And he thinks we should still bring the document as it was. This was a document that was rejected by his MPs, led by him. And today he is asking us to bring the same one. Whether we brought that one which he rejected or bring a new one which he has announced he will reject, the man is bent on rejecting anything. So I don't think it matters what we brought, he is bent on rejecting whatever was brought. And I think it's premeditated with him.